Welcome once again to this EU Civil Society Forum 2022. I got the date right this time, not 1922. And the breakout session number 2 on rule of law. We've got 4 very, I think, really interesting and panelists that are going to be joining us today. Let me introduce you I think, in order of the agenda. We have Mark. Now you're going to correct me. Is it Jorna or Jorna or can you hear it? Can you hear us?
Yeah, Jorna.
Jorna. Okay, Mark
Jorna.
is calling from Brussels, I believe, in DG NEAR.
Yeah.
Welcome, and thanks for your patience. I'm looking at the screen. I should be looking at the camera actually, because I want to see you. The back of my head.
I see the back of your head.
I shall look at the camera in that case. Next to Mark, we have Alexander, and is it Krzyżalowski or Kozłowski? Krzyżalowski. Okay, who's from the MCIC, the Macedonian Center for International Cooperation. Welcome. We have Dusan Šabić from Balkan Tender Watch. You're online. Welcome, Dusan.
Thank you.
And you can hear us now, which is great.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Great. Okay, and we also have Branko Birac from the Center for European Policy, or European Policy Center in Belgrade. Great. Well, welcome everyone. So, rule of law is certainly a theme that that civil society has been very engaged in. I'm not going to give a very long introduction because I want to hear the presentations from everyone and to stimulate some discussion afterwards. So I think if it's okay, Mark, do you want to start? Well, I should look at the camera, but Mark, do you want to start with your presentation? And
yes, fine.
All right, thanks very much.
Of course. Okay, it's unfortunate that I cannot be physically there with you in the room and see you. I mean, the interaction is always better when we are physically together. But okay, that's how it is. Unfortunately, let's hope next time better. Yes, the rule of law. You know, for our process of enlargement and getting your countries join the European Union, you know that this topic is key. It is a part of the fundamentals. It's a key element of being a democratic, open society. And therefore we attach tremendous importance to this. It's not only chapters 23 and 24, which you all know. In the new methodology, we have basically broadened it even with this cluster approach, where we now have a cluster fundamentals. The first cluster, it includes chapter 23 and 24, but also democratic institutions and public administration reform, and all these elements also basically are part of the broader setup to ensure that the rule of law fully applies. And in that context, you as civil society also play a key role. You play a key role in itself as civil society, because in a democratic society, which is of course based on parliamentary elections, which is of once every 4 years, an opportunity for people to say how they want their country to be governed, but also on the day-to-day basis and workings, civil society needs to be involved in order to make sure that indeed the right policies are adopted, that the citizens have the possibility also on individual issues to be heard. Now, that is the general role of civil society in a functioning democracy. But I would say at this very juncture where your country stands, also having civil society specifically focusing on the rule of law and the functioning of the rule of law is absolutely key. Because with that, you can bring about to the media where things are not working well. We appreciate already the cooperation we have with a number of you in the preparation of our annual reports on the chapters 23 and 24, where you tell us how you see the situation in your own countries. So all of that is extremely important. I think what is going to be helpful for you also is the guidelines which we have established for the specific financial support which you can get from us. And you know, I'm not telling you anything new. That you know, the basic elements in ensuring the rule of law is, of course, to have an independent judiciary. I mean, they are the only ones who can counter the power of government and other elements of power in the national structure. The public prosecutor, who cannot be part of the government, I mean, he needs to be independent. It cannot be the Minister of Justice or the Interior to tell the prosecutor, hey, go after this guy or that lady. No, they have to work independently and on the basis of the law. And something which is also a heritage of the former communist system, security services cannot have an institutional or other link with the prosecutorial services. They have to do their job in terms of making sure that there is no undue interference by third parties in your country. But their role is not to link directly and provide directly information to the prosecutorial service, because that unfortunately becomes a very incestuous system which more often is abused than used in the correct manner. So, you know, these are the I would say the three basics, the fundamentals. And from there is the issue of the judicial culture, where those authorities should be doing their job in the right manner. And of course, you come in on both elements. One, to make sure that the structures are right. And I mean, if I take an example, I mean, Serbia, it has taken, I don't know how long, and thankfully now we are there, that the appointment of judges is out of the hands of the parliament. So in Serbia, it can start to have an independent judiciary. So it's on the fundamentals there that you have a role to play. But then there is, where the fundamentals are there, you have a key role to make sure that the system works. And there, I mean, of course, you as CSOs who are working in the area of the rule of law or want to work in the area of the rule of law, you there have a prime responsibility. But I would say for any civil society organization, even if you're working in the environment, you have to make sure that the laws which have been adopted on the environment are indeed correctly implemented. So there also, all the CSOs working in their specific domain, be it agriculture, be it the environment, be it transport, also a role to make sure that the rule of law applies. Richard, I would like to keep it at this as an introduction, and happy to answer questions or to participate further in the debate. In any event, thank you very much for inviting us in DG NEAR and me to have the opportunity to present this important meeting. Thanks.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. That was a great little quick overview. I'm going to go straight to the next panelists, and we'll go through all the panelists, but if you can stay online, Mark, if you can field some questions when we open the floor for debate, that'll be great. Next, can we turn to Alexander? Alexander has a presentation for us, I believe. So if you guys can put up the presentation, then we'll go straight in. Alexander, I'll give you the microphone.
Thank you, Richard, and welcome to Skopje and Macedonia. And if the presentation is on, I'll try to start it. Yeah. Let's see. Good. So let me present myself first and who I'm representing here. Richard told you I'm Alexander Krzalovski, Director of Macedonian Center for International Cooperation that serves currently as the Secretariat of the CELDI network. I'll use a lot of abbreviations in this presentation. CELDI stands for Southeast Europe Leadership for Development Initiative. Basically we are known for our monitoring role on corruption in the Balkans region, a methodology that was developed by the Center for Study of Democracy, CSD in Bulgaria, who led the network in the previous 4 years. And basically we are a part of this EU-supported group of networks in the Balkans for the last 8 years in our case, that are monitoring several aspects of the work and EU assistance. In our case, that is rule of law, good governance, and especially corruption. And in this period, we developed several tools, let's call it, monitoring tools, again, with a lot of interesting abbreviations. This stands for a corruption monitoring system. That is the main thing, and I'll use part of it, but I will not go in too much details as they are already published and presented elsewhere already. And following the corruption monitoring system, we are developing every 2-year regional anti-corruption report, which is based on what Bulgarians call victimization, real experience with corruption, not only perceptions. Then MACPE, which is monitoring anti-corruption policies tool, and the latest that we developed in the recent years, so-called SCAT, or the state capture tool for monitoring the recent phenomenon of captured state, starting from Macedonia, but also present in other countries. So I'll use a few, not too many, I think it's only 4 or 5 slides with main results from our monitoring reports. And one of those is corruption monitoring system for last year. It was presented this April, so you can, some of you have seen it already, many can check it in full on our websites, but basically what I wanted to point out is what is the situation with the corruption in the region, and basically that it is deteriorating in the last few years. Most of this, as you will see later, results are worse than it was the case 2014-16. And one of the main characteristics is this, one of these 9 indicators is corruption pressure, which means that percentage of people that are asked for a bribe in each of the countries. You see with the gray bar. And in case of Albania, it's even more than half of population have been asked for. But you see all percentages are quite alarming and high. And the red bar is involvement in corruption. Basically, how many of those that were asked for a bribe actually gave the bribe. And as you can see, there is little resistance to corruption. So basically, that's why corruption is so widespread. We can talk a bit more of the reasons. I'll tackle a bit among them, some of them, but the situation is far from good and is pretty alarming that, in my opinion, to the point of no return, maybe. One more thing related to this corruption pressure is how this was going on throughout the years. And as you can see, instead of improving from the years, we are getting worse and worse in each of the, more or less each of the countries. Interesting thing, as you can see, only 2 green lines, green bars are arrows, are Serbia and Montenegro. That leads to some conclusion that that the EU accession path or open EU accession path gives some incentive to fight corruption. At least that is what we can infer from this graph. In the other cases, including Albania and Macedonia, that are waiting for in the waiting room for EU accession talks and negotiations, it's actually contributing to worsening the situation. And now another thing that we are using, as I mentioned, just to see why this is not working. Okay, it should be good now. No. Can you move next slide? I have a problem with this. Yeah. Is the state capture thing, something that was became prominent in Macedonia in 2015 with the previous government, and we had one of the first conferences when we used the term state capture, and a few months later also European Union for the first time put that in their progress report for the country. Later on it spread around to also other Balkan countries. And it says basically what is the level of state capture in each of the countries, and especially on business state capture pressure, that how many businesses are pressured by the politicians, and institutional enablers, what we call in various ways, that create an environment for this phenomenon known as state capture. And as you can see, it is quite high in all the countries. Again, in Albania, kind of worse situation. And these are elements that we have in mind when we talk about these enablers of state capture. And as you can see, they are also quite high in each of the countries, especially lack of integrity, lack of impartiality, or party dominance in decision making, starting from employment in public administration to all the other outcomes of the tenders, etc. And as you can see, the worst thing is actually ineffectiveness of anti-corruption policies. That maybe we have good laws, but as seen in most of the EU report recently, they say, yeah, the laws are more or less okay, but implementation is far from okay. And even that is changing in the recent few years, that even laws are getting worse, because especially in our case of Macedonia and perhaps in Albania, that not starting the negotiations for EU accession actually leads to changes in the laws that were already aligned with European Union requirements, but now are reversed back in some articles that are enabling particular interest to find its way through the system, not in line with EU regulations, but because we are negotiating, politicians say we can do this and we can revert back to the already achieved standards once we are close to the EU accession. So to summarize all these things that were said or presented in the main graphs from our various reports, we can infer that the progress achieved in anti-corruption in the mid 2000 to somehow 2015 are now getting worse. So we have a reverse trend, and I link that strongly to the delays in EU accession process. That even we had some small improvements from 2 years ago. It is still higher than it was several years ago, and that there is no even shame now in the countries of Balkan to admit that you have been given a bribe. That 20 to 40% in various countries have admit openly in the surveys that we do that they have been asked for a bribe, and that they in most cases gave the bribe. So it's pretty common environment now, and common acceptable behavior to basically finish any work, business, issue a document, that it's easier to actually pay something to the administrator than to wait regular procedure to be done without any bribe. And because of that, the tolerance is growing, and which is more worrying is that younger generation is even more tolerant to corruption than the older ones. So, and finally, that leads or closing the cycle that people are actually not optimistic that this can change, that this is going in the wrong direction, but that they have lost hope that this thing is reversible. And when thinking about this, it came to my mind one joke that older people are saying about sex. And it says that was a very good thing that we dearly remember. And we can say now for the rule of law and the situation in corruption that we remember that we had better times in this, but now how the time is passing, we forget how it was to actually have uncorrupted society, even as we go back to Yugoslavia times, that it was probably better and less corrupted than it is now. So what we can do and what can EU do about this? Unfortunately, one thing that we are preparing now, and the next slide I will show, is more a question for the DG NEAR and the EU Commission, and that is the level of funding that the new IPA 3 mechanism is providing for rule of law and fighting corruption and improving democracy. And IPA 2 actually had 43% of the funding was for those purposes. So quite big attention was given to that. But now, as far as we have managed to check from the budgets published for coming 7 years, it's only 15%. We have checked this and double checked, and we will do a third time before we publish this. So it is more of a call for DG NEAR or EU Commission to check is this correct view on the budget, IPA 3 budget. But it's worrying that even EU is kind of giving up on this topic. So to finish off, what we can do. Yeah, we can, of course, continue with these nice reports and assessments and monitoring how we are progressing or regressing, better said, in fight against corruption and not much improvements in the rule of law. But obviously that is not enough, and I can compare this with the climate change emergency, how it is called now, that we know that we are doing something. We know that the governments are also doing something. We know that this is not enough. And the question is, will we see the moment when this will destroy us, like the climate change, when the time will come to act decisively to solve the problem? And I can see that this is going in a similar way, that we are just continuing to do not enough to reverse those trends. But you at least have a massive instrument, and that is the funding, because most of the countries are interested in EU because of EU funds that are supposed to come in this period, but especially with the membership. And this should be linked, whatever EU, especially that they announced massive investments to tackle post-COVID situation in the Balkan as well. So when enforcing these mechanisms, basically, this should be linked with the rule of law situation and anti-corruption, also to avoid that those money end up in wrong hands or in the hands of few politicians and powerful people in positions in each of our countries, as, for example, was the case in Bulgaria several years ago, even when they were about to become EU member, and some years afterwards. So I'll stop here and leave the space for discussion. But yeah, the situation is not there, and we remember better times.
Alexander, thank you very much indeed. There's some really interesting questions coming out of that one. I've written them down because I'm going to save them for later, but I hope Mark stays online, because I know that IPA question is going to come up a bit later on. I think just a warning to you, Mark, just to be prepared for that question to come up a bit later on. I think there's some really interesting stuff you mentioned, and I think if we remember Tony Vidon's speech from yesterday and his list of his very long list of things that need to be addressed, which were basically corruption, I think, corruption, and there was one other thing, but I think corruption came on the list as well. If we start throwing money at things, and his warning, if we start throwing money at things, but there is corruption, how can we be sure that those things will be achieved for which the money is intended? So I think these are really, really interesting questions, and it links out beyond rule of law to almost every area of certainly EU assistance to the region. Now, at risk of being even more depressed, I'm going to hand over to the Open Society Foundation, to Dusan Shabic at Balkan Tender Watch. I hope he's got some good news for us, but I'm not so sure that knowing a little bit about the tender processes in the region, I hope that it won't be too depressing for us. So maybe we can see, I don't know if we can go back to the Zoom and see Dusan. Are you with us, Dusan? Can you hear us?
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
Thank you,
great.
Richard. Thank you, Richard. You can hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
We can hear you. We can't see you yet, but the technicians are working on it. So hopefully I'll keep remembering to look into the camera and not at the screen.
No problem. No problem. Well, once again, greetings to all of you, both from my side and from the side of coalition that I represent here today. It's a really great pleasure to have the opportunity to participate in the discussion about such important and, of course, interesting topic. And I want to thank the organizers for that, of course. Also, great thanks to the rest of today's panelists. I have listened very carefully to the previous ones, and they really raised some important questions and have pointed out some very interesting findings and conclusions. And
just a second before you carry on, we can't hear you very well here in the hall.
I'm sorry. Should I be more loud or?
Yeah, be a bit louder, but I'm also hoping the technicians can sort something out. But yes, if you could speak maybe closer to the microphone or a bit louder, that'll be helpful.
Okay, I will try to be as loud as possible. Just a brief introduction from my side. As Richard said, my name is Dusan Shabic. I'm project leader of the Balkan Tender Watch project, which is supported by the European Union, and also I'm working as a program coordinator of the anti-corruption program here at the Open Society Foundation, Serbia. Today's topic is really closely related to the work we are conducting with the support of the European Union, and which is aimed at precisely at increasing Western Balkan civil society impact on anti-corruption policies and practices in the public procurement area. So we at the Balkan Tender Watch Coalition, which gathers organizations from five Western Balkan countries, namely Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Serbia, North Macedonia, and Montenegro, joined our forces and efforts in order to try to tackle the widespread corruption, especially in the area of public procurement. But enough, of course, with the introduction. Let's get to the point. And today's topic, CSO role, so in promoting the rule of law. Well, last 2 years undoubtedly were very rough and stressful for all of us. Pandemic of COVID-19 virus, of course, introduced complete new dimension of life and work. But when I look back, despite all the difficulties and hard moments, it also revealed even more the importance of CSOs in both preserving and promoting the rule of law. We have all witnessed introduced state of emergency, curfews, human rights suspensions, restrictions, etc. And as you all know, crisis times are not so-called fertile ground for the rule of law. Exactly the opposite. In the times like these, authoritarian regimes and tendencies grow and tend to strengthen their power, which is big threat to the rule of law, as we all know. And especially during the COVID-19 crisis, in certain moments when our institutions were closed or were operating with the minimum capacities, CSOs, of course, together with citizens and media representatives, were the only remaining guardians of the rule of law. These subjects were the only ones and probably the first ones that were openly, questioned the decisions of our authorities. suspension of certain human rights like Freedom of Information Act, suspension of public procurement law, online trials, verdicts, and the things like that. So in the most difficult times when we faced peak of the pandemic, CSO were more than active, and I believe that they really united their forces in order to preserve rule of law. And although all of us are constantly talking about the synergy, and we like that term synergy, I really believe that precisely COVID time showed us how synergy and joint work of citizens, media representatives, and CSOs coming from different areas can lead to really great things. But when we are talking in general, question of all questions, of course, is what strategy, approach, or action to conduct, undertake, or implement in order to achieve desired change or improvement that is aimed at rule of law. And based on our coalition experience, the regional approach turned out to be very good and effective. In such specific areas like fight against the corruption, and we are witnesses, unfortunately, that corruption is probably one of the biggest burdens of the entire region. Pure, frontal fight with the opponent face to face is something that is doomed to failure, because the opponent is simply too strong, And many years of dealing with these issues clearly showed us that. Precisely because of that, our approach was to unite our forces on a regional, national, and local level. And our main strategy was to use EU accession process as a strong leverage and to make the governments in our countries to feel, but also to act competitive. We dedicated our work to fight against the corruption in the field of public procurement, and for that purpose, we created unique kind of tool. We called it benchmarking tool, which enabled us to rank our countries based on vulnerability of public procurement systems to corruption. And why we chose to rank them? Because, for example, in Serbia, when you say Sweden or Germany is far more better concerning corruption in public procurement, probably the answer you will get will be, but that is quite normal, they are all EU members with established democratic values, firm rule of law principles, and things like that. But for instance, when you say North Macedonia is twice better than Serbia, you can attract immediate attention of the competent authorities. Then they want to act, want to know why the first neighbors are better than us. And in addition, when you present concrete findings to the wider interested public, like we do, when you present determined irregularities and concrete data, they really do not feel comfortable. And so-called blame and shame approach in the past 8 years resulted in concrete legislative changes in our country. Changes based on recommendations of our coalition, other experts coming from domestic and international scene, And we realize that the problem we share are more or less similar or even the same, and that we are all in some phase of the EU integration process, and that only by connecting, networking, and sharing knowledge, we create some change on the ground. And as I already mentioned, not just regionally connecting, we also tried to connect locally as well. And we created a network of more than 50 grassroots organizations from the entire Western Balkans. We provided trainings for them, empowered them, and increased their knowledge in the areas of rule of law, fight against corruption, transparency, accountability, and public integrity. And we tried to monitor the concrete public procurement cases with them together. And by applying, learning by doing a kind of approach to empower them even more and to make their work sustainable even when the current project or current activities is finished. And by connecting all these actors to established forum, we enabled sharing of knowledge, common problems, and experience from the entire region. And the main idea and the main reason why we did this was because in the past we have noticed that so-called national civil society engagement on anti-corruption topics tends to be highly professionalized, elite, disconnected from the grassroots. And I can hear someone else talking. sorry, and we simply wanted to create firm linkages between these two kind of constituencies, because we witnessed that grassroots groups may understand the specific corruption challenges of their community much better, but also on the other hand might struggle to see, you know, systemic linkages between different types and levels of corruption in the same way like national organizations can. And many local actors also lack the confidence and tools to address technical aspects of corruption. Like in our example, illegality and corruption in public procurement. They also have many difficulties in linking with other grassroots groups in different parts of the country or the region, because you know, their reach is limited. So as a result of mentioned disconnection between national and grassroots groups, both groups in the result struggle to break through public resignation about corruption and build sufficient political will for some kind of serious reform. And precisely because of that, we applied the approach I described. We really tried to make a firm connection and firm network of both local, national, and regional actors. And I think that was really it really showed up to be quite good and effective, and that can be used in the time ahead of us. But when we are talking about priorities within the rule of law, maybe for the following period, I honestly think that rule of law is priority, you know, per se, and only areas in which the rule of law is endangered are changing through the time. And maybe it's just kind of, you know, professional deformation for me, but I'm more than convinced that curbing corruption is the prerequisite for the rule of law in any area. And corruption is the phenomenon, of course, that simply cannot be eliminated, vanquished, but of course that it can be reduced, and even more important, and Mark a little bit tackled that issue, the corrupt individuals or corrupt acts can and must be prosecuted and convicted. The main problem that we are facing, I'm talking about Serbia, but I know that there are many similar examples in the entire region, is complete impunity of the responsible ones when it comes to corrupt behavior and corrupt acts. But when we are talking about potential new areas where the rule of law will be endangered in the following period, I can think about at least two of them. And one of them is for sure the environment, where we all already have detected many problems. Foreign and domestic investors that are coming or investing in our countries are almost abolished for endangering health, human environment, and violating provisions. Our air, our woods, our waters in the past 5 years were literally under siege. And I believe the rule of law in the following years in the environmental sector will face even more serious threats, and that it has to be defended at any cost. And the other area I consider rule of law as of great importance is digital sphere, digital area, digital space, whatever you prefer to call it. When we are talking about this area, the main threat is directed to our privacy, of course, our personal data, our personal life in general, and biometric processing of data, intelligent video surveillance, artificial intelligence in general. All that are the things that have already entered our everyday life. And they really need to be properly regulated and implemented in order not to endanger some of the basic human rights principles, such as right to privacy, personal data protection, and so on. And when we are talking about the sustainability and improvement of CSO sectors, and when I look at the horizon and ask myself what can be done in the following periods, first and foremost, I truly believe that it is of essential importance that Western Balkans remain in the focus of the European Union. Because slow and painstaking, really painstaking reforms would be conducted even more slower or not at all if there was not EU on the scene. And EU recognized, of course, CSOs actors and vice versa as natural allies. And the sad story is that in our countries, that is not in the most of the cases, that is not like that when it comes to our governments and competent authorities. And of course, when it comes to the donor scene, and I honestly think, because I'm also a member of this team, because the Open Society Foundation here in Serbia is working also as a donor. I really think that in the following period, we need to, when it comes to thinking, formulation, and determination of our priorities, strategic goals, and approaches, we really need to be as pragmatic as possible, to hear the voices of our grantees on the ground, of our partners on the ground, and of our associates. And I believe that is really essential if we want to ensure that their work in the years ahead of us stays effective, efficient, and sustainable. And I would finish with this, and thank you very much for the attention. I hope that I didn't take too much time. I'm eager to hear the possible questions or comments, and I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Dusan, thanks very much indeed. That was a great, a very wide-ranging and great review of what you've been doing. But I think also some of the importance of connecting regional with national and local levels, I think it sounds like one of those really useful strategies that we could all, that's quite practical. Talking of local level, I want to hand over to Branko, because the situation seems really quite depressing, but I'm hoping that Branko has some quite good news, in the sense of, he's been working at local level across Serbia, and I would like to hear from him, maybe he won't, that there are some success stories, that things have been able, that you've been able to work on this and change something in some of the, at least some of the municipalities in Serbia, and that could be an example and inspiration for the rest of us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So hi everybody. So I'm Branko, and I work as a project manager in a European Policy Center. Unfortunately, our colleagues from that are working on the Weber project, which is a regional project, and it is undersigned in the agenda, that's why I'm saying this, couldn't join us. Basically, they're having the regional conference on these same days, and I will touch upon it a little later also. Thank you, Richard. I will speak mostly about the that local project that you mentioned. I just wanted to have a little intro regarding the Weber, because it appeared in the agenda and so on. So just to start regionally and then to move it to the local, and also because the Weber is kind of not just inspiration. This other new project, we consider it as a younger sibling of the Weber. They came from the same methodology. Now, regarding this whole panel, in the beginning, I just want to say that our approach and what we are mostly known for, our work, is evidence-based monitoring of public administration reform, which is closely related to the rule of law, as their fundamental areas of reforms. There are strong linkages between public administration reform and rule of law portfolios. Considerable overlaps between these two fundamental areas. Also, we have strong focus on empowering civil society, because if CSOs speak with evidences, they can be much more effective in their dialogue, discussions, in their consultations, and in their efforts to create pressure on local and national governments, if they have evidence. Now, evidence can be based on a research that is sound and robust, but it is even more effective if it also includes feedback from citizens. That is also what we are especially, civil society oriented, but also kind of citizen oriented, if those evidences include information obtained directly from citizens. Now, Weber is probably our most well-known project. Actually, it is implemented by TEN Network, and CEP, European Policy Center, is the coordinator of that network. It's a Think for Europe network. It includes CSOs, CSO partners from 6 Western Balkan countries, so 6 in total. Weber is now in its second 3-year phase. So basically, it's being implemented for practically 6 years now. And Weber has pioneered this evidence-based and civil society-based approach to monitoring progress in public administration reform of the administrations in the region. Weber works on strengthening civil society participation in public administration reform by educating and enabling CSOs to monitor the progress, to assess its quality, and to propose new solutions based on these evidences gathered and analysis of them. Also, Weber and the other local projects, they are all, based on with the idea of creating a bottom-up pressure for reforms to the regional platform or local platform that create dialogues on public administration reforms. PAR monitor methodology is the cornerstone of the Weber. It is based on the Sigma OECD principles of public administration that were, some of them were, how to say, selected. Methodology was developed. Methodology is quantifiable. It also has, 23 compound indicators. Indicators have their own elements. They have scoring from 0 to 5, etc. Also, what is important is that PAR monitor, which is like the main product of the Weber, and think that other things branch out from it, it allows for a regional benchmarking, of countries, of their administrations. Now, this can create and creates kind of a positive competition. It creates a sort of a pressure to showing good cases and bad cases, things that can be better, that can be improved, So, of course, based on all findings, we create recommendations, evidence-based recommendations toward stakeholders. So far, two cycles of monitoring were done. It's done biannually. First one was for the period 2017-18, second for the 19-2020, and the third one is now in process and is going to be finished this year. Now, basically, I could move to the newer project. It's called Public Administration Monitoring for Better Local Governance. In Serbian, we call it Pratim ja. In English, it would be something like I follow or I monitor, something like that. It kind of sounds strange, so I will just use Pratim ja in short. In this project, basically, we are working with local CSOs across Serbia, again, to create pressure on local administrations to improve their integrity, openness, transparency, accountability, provision of services, etc. So, as I said, it's basically Weber's younger brother. It is focused on local level administration, while Weber is focused on central level of administrations in the region. Again, relevant Sigma principles for the local level were first selected. Then there's a period of adaptation and development of methodology. Then we had several extensive trainings for local CSOs who are trained on how to apply the methodology, and that monitoring process being done in 17 cities, targeted cities or municipalities, is currently in progress. And also this will produce 17, 17 local PAR monitoring reports, and one comparative report which compares, results from these cities and municipalities. Again, we will, of course, promote examples of good practice, and we will give recommendations for improvement where it's needed. We will do the advocacy. We will have local events in basically all of these places to promote results, to give recommendations and so on. I would also like to touch upon this strong component of citizen engagement that we have here. Basically, we have developed a questionnaire, a survey for citizens about their experiences with local administrations. But we kind of wanted to do it in a different way than just usual, surveys being done by big agencies or something, because we are also working with local grassroots organizations, mostly activist organizations. So we basically devised a plan for these public actions to be done on the street actions, in front of local administrations, in front of institutions, on city squares. And it's best if it's like in front of city or municipality administration when people come in, or even better, when they come out after having experience or receiving services from that administration, and then to ask them, to approach them, to ask them about their experiences. We also made kind of a stand that looks like a counter that you would encounter in the administration, like a shelter. And we had the people, local activists, dressed up as like, we printed these ties with a sign of the project, and scarves and masks, of course, because of Corona and so on. So we also wanted to, in that way, to approach citizens. This project has this, tries to humanize this team more, team of public administration reform, because it is not so easily, how to say, communicable to the broader audience, and to put, citizen face on it, on this team, because there is this problem of this disconnection between citizens and public administration, and especially reform. And yeah, a large number of these street actions were done, 85, and we reached over 5,200 people who filled the surveys, on the street, and they also had the opportunity to fill it online. And just to give a couple of examples of results from the survey. For example, only 17% of citizens think that officials in their local administrations are employees based on qualifications and competences. 17. They think it's based on that. And other 83% thinks they are employed based on their political or private connections. Now, 58% of citizens have predominantly negative views, negative experiences with local administrations, while 42% have predominantly positive experiences. Then only 11% of people said that they think they have opportunity to be involved in adoption of local budgets. Also, for example, people who are dissatisfied with services, they list reasons like that they have received differing information from officials, civil servants, and instructions, that they were passed over and they had to be walking from office to office, that they received requests for more paperwork when it's not needed. They came across closed doors on many occasions. Yeah, not too much positive results from this survey, but also we have to have in mind that these are the perceptions of citizens. So that is one side. We are also doing that monitoring work, that research monitoring work that I was talking about at the beginning, and that is the other side. So we can also compare perception of citizens and what our researchers will come up when they do their, through review of documentation, desk research, interviews with civil servants, with CSOs, to focus groups and so on. We will also create a book of citizens' grievances. It's going to contain experiences from citizens that they put on the online on platform. And also we had this open call where citizens submitted their positive and negative experiences and in creative ways. So we received some interesting things there. For example, drawn comics, videos, essays. We also had received one poem, which is, I think, the most creative thing that we got. And we made an event. We gave some small awards actually to those people. And so yeah, that's another way to bring it closer to the citizens. So yeah, so much for now.
Okay, Branko, thanks very much indeed. Can I just check that Dusan and Mark are still online? You're still there. Fantastic. Okay, now I think it'll be a good time now to open up the floor for questions. So do we have a microphone for the audience? And someone is monitoring Zoom questions. Okay, all right, great. So first of all, any questions for the panelists? Any questions you want to follow up on, anything, or any comments you want to make, anything that strikes you as particularly interesting? Yeah, we have a question over here. Any microphones now? Okay.
Let's see if someone else would.
Well, let's kick it off. Go on, Emina.
Okay, I'm Emina, P2P manager from Taxo, but from my background, I am really interested in this topic and this issue. I just like to comment the presentation that Alexander had related to the pressure of corruption. And as the main indicators, according to that methodology, is to check the bribe, the pressure related to how many of population were asked to, to provide something to the, let's say, low-level civil servants for some services. And this gives the main picture, let's say, of the situation of the corruption in the country. But we should not forget that bribe is categorized as a petty corruption, which is the lowest form of corruption in the country, involving citizens and low-level civil servants. What we are not very often mentioning and put finger on is the high-level corruption, actually. And I will speak, let's say, for the from the surveys that were prepared in North Macedonia, and the results for in the last, let's say, 5-6 years is that the perception of most where the corruption is most spread, it is among the politicians, among the members of the government, members of the parliament, among the judges and prosecutors. And it is always above 80% of the population that thinks that these professions, let's say, or this category of holders of the power are the most corrupted. And I think the civil society actually should work on two ways. First, to raise the awareness among the population, among the citizens, what kind of damages corruption can provide, and to learn and to provide information to the citizen that they have to receive services for free, of course. And in that sense, the reform of the administration and digitalization of the services, I think it's the best way how to start to deal with this issue. And the second comment actually is a question, maybe not just for Alexander, but for all panelists. In that presentation was said that anti-corruption progress reversed due to the delay in EU integration. And my question is to all of them: do you think that the EU integration, to be a member of EU is the only way and the only opportunity to deal with the corruption, and in general to get out from this situation in which IPA countries are in the recent 20 years, even more?
Emina, thanks very much. Both fascinating questions. Let's pick up, I know Ekmel wants to say something. Let's pick up in Ekmel, and then I want to go back to the panelists with the questions that we collected. We'll get the panelists' responses.
Okay, sorry.
Can you just please introduce yourself?
Just let for 2 minutes, and I thought we are asking the questions now. The floor is open, but I am Ekmel Çizmecioğlu from the EU delegation to Serbia. Thanks a lot for all the participants. It was an interesting input, despite a little delay at the beginning. But I think I probably want to maybe a bit enforce Emina's second point as well. I mean, for me, it was very interesting to hear Alexander's point that the countries that have actually improved their legislation, when they are not provided the perspective of membership, the politicians suddenly decide to change it back. This is a, it's very interesting point, because that also then makes me wonder, okay, what is the, what are we trying to achieve here, with all the support that we do? But I always, I believe in civil society, and I think civil society is the one that should really, fight for these things. And I manage the civil society facility for Serbia, and I believe that, I always tell the civil society organizations that I speak to that, we support you for a better Serbian society. Of course, it's in line with the reforms, with what we are going to for potential membership, but that's important. So I just wanted to, mention that point. That's really interesting. I would appreciate if you can elaborate a bit further on this. Are these really dependent only on membership? And how can we support you better in terms of making the society more active in raising up to the politician and saying, well, no, this is not the right way to do it. We had already improved legislation here. Why are you going back? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, also in line with the colleagues, Ariola from Partners Albania. Thanks very much for the very interesting presentations. In the last 10 years, in all countries, I'm speaking also for Albania, of course, but also in all countries of the region, have been done lots of reforms. And also we have many mechanisms in place, and we have lots of platforms and everything. So this should have had an impact in reducing corruption. While we see that the situation, as also Alexander, but the other colleagues presented, the situation is far away from improvement. So while we are going toward digitalization of the services, and speaking here, as I said, for Albania, but also for other countries in the region, we should, but also changes in the law and reinforcement of laws and etc. is very important to focus also on the implementation and monitoring. It is very important, and the crucial role of civil society here is also important. But I'm going to link this with another point that Alexander mentioned about the funding. If we are having a reduction of the funding for the civil society sector that address the anti-corruption and rule of law issues, who is going to do that, this monitoring, but also the awareness and everything that colleagues mentioned as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pause your questions there. I want to now take them back to the panel. I think if Mark is around, I think we've got three basic, very, very interesting questions. I think Mark, maybe you'd like to respond to. I think there's this question of the link between the progress in EU accession and corruption, and whether you perceive also that link. There's the question of is funding for civil society and funding through EPA on rule of law, is that actually decreasing? It may be as a percentage, but is it actually decreasing as an absolute amount? And is there a reason for that? And then the third question I think would be interesting to explore is the link then, with high level corruption. And if we're monitoring, if civil society is able to look at tenders and bribery and so on, what are the opportunities, what are the areas of engagement for actually monitoring high-level corruption, and who is responsible for that? So I don't know if Mark, I don't know if those questions are, you'd like to respond to any of those questions.
Richard, yes, of course, fine. First of all, thank you very much for the participants for their questions. On the issue of corruption and the link to joining the EU, of course, there should not be a link. I mean, any democratic society will normally want to live without corruption. So we will help you and do everything we can in order to make sure that corruption reduces, and to the extent we can get rid of it. But of course, it is something which really normally should come from the people themselves. And I mean, look at the Ukraine. I mean, Zelensky got elected on a ticket that he wanted to fight corruption and finally turn the Ukraine into a Western democracy. Well, we've seen the result of Russia's reaction to that. Bulgaria, the present prime minister, also was elected on such a ticket. So normally speaking, I mean, it should be coming from the people themselves. Hey, we don't want that. And in that sense, Alexander's statistics for me are a little bit worrying, in the sense that it gives the impression as if a large part of the population really doesn't care, and that is, of course, is really worrying. Now, as regards our financing for the rule of law, rest assured that we will make available the funds that are necessary in order to make sure that there is progress and that the systems work. We have made under IPA 2 a tremendous investment in making sure that the legislation is right, and making sure that the institutions are there to do the job. I mean, take the example of Albania, where, of course, we have been supporting and are still supporting the vetting of the entire justice system, all the judges, all the prosecutors. And I hope that as a result of that also, Alexander, next time you bring figures for Albania, that it will look significantly different from what they are looking at now. I think for you, and that links up with your last question, Richard, on high-level corruption and corruption with EU funds. You know that we have now, since 1 year, a European public prosecutor. And the European public prosecutor can bring to justice those who fraud with European money. They have in the EU already recovered hundreds of millions of funds, and people have been jailed on the basis of their work. Now, we have opened up the possibility for the European Public Prosecutor to become active in your countries. But your governments need to conclude agreements with the EPPO so that they can work in your countries. And I think there you have a crucial role as civil society to push your governments that this is indeed done. And then they will help your national prosecutors. And if your national prosecutors don't do it, they will do it for you to make sure that those who are abusing the European funds to put it in their own pockets, that they will be brought to justice. So I think there is an open invitation, and we have mentioned it to the ministers for justice. A number of them, like Albania and North Macedonia, have said yes. We want to conclude arrangements with the EPPO, and they are discussing it with them in Luxembourg. There are other ministers who, at the ministerial meeting where we proposed it, remain silent, and for me that is worrying. So voila, I think there we have a new European kid on the block who can be very helpful also in your region to fight corruption. Richard, I would like to leave it at this stage. Happy to answer other questions or make other interventions.
Okay, Mark, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Maybe Alexander, since all the questions have been directed at you, maybe you'd like to respond to some of it.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll start with the last thing that Mark said, and I'm glad that Laura Kovesi is actually the public prosecutor in European level, and we were the ones that brought her here in Macedonia in the time of previous government on that one of those conferences that I mentioned with state capture. So I do also hope that she will continue the work she did in Romania at that time, and that there will be pressure like at least we saw in Bulgaria, turbulences already happened just from one visit there. And I think that is important, and also to point out from high level, from EU prosecution office to each of the countries, including those that are not members like ours. And I agree, yeah, with Amina that even our research, because it's based on, again on public polls of citizens' opinions, were not that focused on high-level corruption. But I agree that by far it's in terms of money, it's bigger than all this petty corruption that is happening. And for me, it's problematic that now 5 years after we have new government that was accusing and was actually brought to power with a lot of effort also from civil society to change that previous behavior and corruption, that the assessment was that the previous government stole between 500 million euros and 5 billion euros in their 11 years in power. The stupid factor or pity is that by now the new government and the institution in their jurisdiction recovered less than 1 million. 1 million out of all those 500 to 5 billion. Huh? So basically nothing is happening, which also contributes, not to blame only EU accession, also this notion contributes that there is impunity, that people are not punished, they're not ending up in jail, they're not even deprived from the assets that they have illegally obtained, and that is contributing to this perception or lack of will in the people to actually do something, because they see not much can be done. So yes, I agree that people should make the move, but again, when there is no work done by the government, even all those commitments about fighting corruption, when there is no pressure that much from EU on the same subject, also when seeing some EU countries how they are dealing, like Poland and Hungary, on these issues, and our politicians get even more encouraged to continue and to follow now on the ECMAL question. Also to change the laws in their benefit, personal benefit or party benefit, and if something stays for the rest of the people. So that's why, and we what I pointed out, like this degradation in the laws, is from our other assessment. We are following how the parliament is working and have this electronic system for public participation, and we do contribute in that, but we follow on a monthly basis how laws are brought, and in many cases it's there are 100 laws in one session. The parliament is not working for 3-4 months, not bringing any law because of boycotts, because of what they say active blockade we have currently from the opposition in Macedonia. So then the session comes to solve all those things when finally the parties will agree about something, and then on one session in one day 100 laws will pass. In many cases justification is just to align many small changes with some other law that was brought to bring them in consistency. But actually, first, is not true in many cases. It is just an excuse for people not to check what exactly is changed in the law. And then you see that only, okay, maybe 1 or 2 articles are changed, but it's really to bring possibility for a particular interest to be served by the law, and they can claim we are according to the law and stuff like that. So yeah, I'll stop a bit here, and I don't know if I didn't cover anything else.
Thanks, Alexander. Oh, you have a raised hand. Okay, excellent. Mark, would you like to come back on?
Yes, maybe very quickly on what Alexander mentioned about the changes made to the law. Of course, we have our colleagues in the delegations who help us and inform there where they can, but they are also, I mean, short of staff to follow everything. So where you see these kind of things, please inform us. Please inform the delegation, us in DG NEAR directly, because we will do something about it. I mean, part of the obligation of membership is that that your countries take over the acquis, but you know as well that in the meantime, we have in our assessment gone way beyond just the European legislation, and we're working on a number of basic principles. So if we see that laws are changed just for one specific private interest, let us know, and we will react to these things. Voilà, that's just what I wanted to say. So don't feel that you are there alone fighting like Don Quixote windmills. No, we are there with you to make sure that these things don't happen.
Mark, thanks very much. That's good to know. I have a question. I have a question to follow up, and I think I'd kind of like to direct it towards sort of Dusan and Branko. But there's a really general question about the media and about public information, about the public domain. So, if politicians and public officials know they're being watched, I mean, it goes back to an old Plato, in fact, story about an invisibility ring that. There's a question about if you become invisible, would you behave morally or not? Anyway, I won't go into the debates about that, but I think the conclusion is that if you know you're being watched, you behave better than if you think you're not being watched, if you think you're invisible. And that links to then the monitoring activities that you're doing and you're talking about, but it also then links to how much does the public know about the monitoring activities that you're doing and the information that you're providing. And then when you talk to the public, most of the communication is mediated through the media. And in some of the countries in our region, we know that there is a very strong state control over the media. To what extent do you think that state control and that access to the media is an issue when it comes to your ability to highlight corruption, highlight rule of law issues? Or is it something that you can avoid by using social media? I don't know if Dusan or Branko, would either of you like to respond?
Yes, of course I can. Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's a very, 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 very important topic, because prerequisite for the thing you mentioned. So to have a space at least to present our findings and everything else is to have minimum standards of free media in our country. Unfortunately, situation in Serbia at the moment is quite opposite to that. And even when the media are coming to be present at our conferences, other public events and such, the news that are produced based on our presentations are more close to the misinformation or fake news than actual findings from our report. So I really believe that the question you mentioned in the very end is closely related to the rule of law. So if you have a combination of state capture together with limited freedom of media and situation within the judiciary, like I mentioned, with the complete impunity for the ones that are conducting criminal, especially corruption-related acts and violations, the result has to be and unfortunately is many threats to the preservation of the rule of law, especially in Serbia. I'm talking about Serbia at the moment.
Thanks very much. I've just looked at the time, but I feel like we can carry on for maybe 5 more minutes since we had a delayed start. Are there any other questions coming from the audience? I'd like to give everyone a chance to speak or question or comment. Does anyone else want to say something? Yeah.
Hello everyone, I am Ahmed Rushidi from the Kosovo Civil Society Foundation. And thank you everyone for your presentations and the comments and input that you have given us this morning through the panel on this very important topic on rule of law. I think that the rule of law, it's like it has 3 dimensions, especially when involving civil society, is that as a civil society organization, we have to act like as a watchdog for the public institutions, judicial systems, but also political parties and society. But also we should like, as Amina mentioned, we should empower and inform citizens about their rights and the means that the corruption brings us. In the many cases in our countries in Western Balkans, we can see that the corruption perception for corruption like is either decreasing or increasing year by year. It depends on the political turmoils or the changes of governments in different kind like of countries. For example, like if we had like in Kosovo a rise like in perception for corruption like for 2017 and 19, but then like we had a big political turmoil when like the old parties went like to the opposition, a new party like come to the government, and then immediately people like started to have the perception that things are moving for better and like the corruption is decreasing, which is like a fact. But now something is missing on all this discussion that no one mentioned that. And we know that we are civil society organization, but also government, we can like propose best practices, policies, laws and everything. But when it comes to implementation, it's something that we lack. More than implementation, like I just want like something with Alexander that mentioned that 5 years, like we had a government that promised like to bring back the money and they managed to bring only 1 million. Like I can tell you, like, for example, in Kosovo, like we have more than 600 million that were like stopped from the project that were from previous government, that now new government seem to be like a big corruption project. But there is only one thing that we can change each year, government, and politicians and political parties, but what can we do about the judicial system? I mean, prosecutors, judges, I mean, it's something that if for them it takes like 6 years, 10 years, like to like conclude a corruption case, then we can like go back, as you mentioned, like to our very beginning. But unless we have a independent, powerful judicial system, we can do everything, change governments, change political parties, but if they do not react and conclude the corruption cases, we have done nothing. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Are there any other comments from the floor, from participants? Okay, any final words from the panel? Would anyone else like to say anything in conclusion on this debate? No, in that case, I think we will.
Maybe just one word, Richard, from our side of encouragement to all of you. Keep up the good work and know that we are there with you to help you where necessary, and let's make sure that we get rid of this corruption together, and that we can have you in the not too distant future as part of the European Union. Thanks.
On that note, that's a great note to end on. Keep up the good work and keep fingers crossed. Hopefully things will happen. Let's see if the European Public Prosecutor will be able to make a difference. Thanks very much, everyone. We have a rapporteur, do we? I forgot to ask. I hope someone's been making notes. We're reporting back in the next session, so I'll I'll be talking to someone over the coffee break. Okay, thanks very much. Enjoy your coffee, and we'll see you at 11:30 in the main plenary room for the next session. Thank you.